When you think of World War II, air combat, what comes to mind? Propeller planes, right? Spitfires, Mustangs, Zeros. But what if I told you the jet age didn't start after the war, but right in the middle of it? The race to build a first combat-ready jet fighter was one of the most secretive and high-stakes competitions of the entire conflict. Today, we're going to look at every single jet aircraft that was actually built in World War II. Not just concepts, not just blueprints, but real flying machines that screamed through the skies. Let's start where it all began, in Germany. The Heinkel He 178 was the world's very first aircraft to fly purely on turbojet power. Its first flight was on August 27, 1939, just days before the invasion of Poland. It was a small, unassuming, private venture, but it proved the concept worked. It was a pioneer, a true trailblazer, but it never saw combat. It was more of a proof of concept, a tech demonstrator that showed the world what was possible. Following the He 178, Heinkel developed the He 280. This was the first aircraft designed from the ground up as a jet fighter. It had 2 engines, a tricycle landing gear, and even an ejection seat. It first flew in 1941 and was seriously impressive, outperforming the top propeller fighters of the day. But political wrangling and engine problems meant the German Air Ministry ultimately favored a rival design. The He 280, despite its promise, was sidelined. Imagine how different the air war might have been if this had entered service early on. Now we get to the one everyone knows, the Messerschmitt Me 262, the Schwalbe, or Swallow. This was the world's first operational jet-powered fighter aircraft. Seeing one of these for the first time must have been terrifying for Allied pilots. It was over 100 miles per hour faster than the P-51 Mustang. Armed with 4 30mm cannons in the nose, it was a bomber killer, pure and simple. When a squadron of Me-262s attacked a formation of B-17s, the results were devastating. However, it arrived too late and in too few numbers to change the course of the war. Its engines were unreliable, needing an overhaul after just 10 hours, and it was incredibly vulnerable during takeoff and landing. Allied fighters would lurk near German airfields, waiting to pounce. But the Me-262 wasn't just a fighter. They also developed a reconnaissance version and, controversially, a bomber version called the Sturmvogel, or Stormbird. This diversion of resources from the fighter program is often cited as a major mistake that diluted its impact. Next up from Germany is the Arado Ar 234 Blitz, or Lightning. This was the world's first operational jet-powered bomber and reconnaissance aircraft. Imagine a sleek, single-pilot plane, faster than any Allied fighter, flying over your heads. And there's nothing you can do about it. In its early versions, it even took off from a jettisonable trolley and landed on skids to save weight. Later versions had conventional landing gear. The AR-234 flew numerous recon missions over Britain and the Allied beachheads in Normandy, providing valuable intelligence completely unopposed. As a bomber, its speed made it almost impossible to intercept. It was a remarkable piece of engineering. Germany's last operational jet of the war was the Heinkel He 162 Volksschütze, or People's Fighter. This was a desperate, last-ditch effort. Made primarily of wood, it was designed to be built quickly by semi-skilled labor and flown by pilots with minimal training. It had a single jet engine mounted on its back, giving it a unique look. It was fast, but it was also tricky and dangerous to fly. Some did see combat in the final weeks of the war, but it was a case of too little, too late. A symbol of Germany's desperation more than a truly effective weapon. There were other German projects that flew, but weren't operational. The Horten Ho 229, a futuristic flying wing, was a stealth fighter bomber prototype that had test flights. It looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. Then there was the Junkers Ru 287, a bizarre-looking bomber with forward-swept wings, designed to test aerodynamics for a next-generation bomber. These were marvels of engineering, but they were firmly in the experimental category when the war ended. Now, let's hop across the English Channel to Great Britain. The British were right on Germany's tail, thanks to the genius of Frank Whittle, who independently invented the turbojet engine. Their first jet aircraft was the Gloster E-28-39. It first flew in May 1941. Like the German He 178. It was a small, unarmed testbed, but its successful flight proved Whittle's engine design was the real deal and kicked British jet development into high gear. This led directly to the Gloster Meteor. This was the Allies' first and only operational jet fighter of World War II. It entered service in July 1944, just in time to counter a new German threat, the V-1 flying bomb. Meteors were tasked with chasing down these doodlebugs over southern England. Because the V-1 South were so fast, propeller fighters struggled to catch them. The Meteor's speed made it the perfect interceptor. A fun fact, because their cannons were prone to jamming early on, Meteor pilots developed a tactic of flying alongside the V-1 and tipping its wing with their own, toppling its gyroscope and sending it crashing. How crazy is that? The Meteor never actually engaged the Me-262 in air-to-air combat. Allied High Command, fearing a captured Meteor could give away their jet secrets, prohibited it from flying over German-held territory. So we never got the jet versus jet dogfight everyone wonders about. By the end of the war, Meteors were flying ground attack missions over Germany. Now, let's head across the Atlantic to the United States. The Americans were a bit behind at first, but they caught up fast. A British Gloster Meteor engine was secretly flown to the U.S. in 1941. General Electric was tasked with reverse engineering and improving it, while Bell Aircraft was told to build a plane for it. The result was the Bell P-59 Komet. It first flew in October 1942, becoming America's first jet aircraft. However, its performance was underwhelming. It wasn't much faster than the top propeller fighters of the day. It was seen as a valuable training tool rather than a frontline combatant. It never saw combat, but it taught American pilots and ground crews everything they needed to know about operating jets. The real star of the early American jet program was the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star. This was a sleek, beautiful aircraft designed around a powerful new British engine. Development was incredibly fast. From initial concept to first flight took just 143 days, a project run out of the legendary Skunk Works. The P-80 was a world-class fighter, easily a match for the Me-262. 4 pre-production models were sent to Europe for evaluation at the very end of the war. In 1945, 2 saw limited service in Italy for reconnaissance, but the war ended before they could see any combat. The P-80 went on to be a key fighter in the Korean War, but it just missed being a World War II combat jet. What about the other major powers? The Soviet Union had the Mikoyan Gurevich I-250 and the Sukhoi Su-5. Now, these are interesting because they weren't pure jets. They were motor jets. A piston engine powered the propeller and also drove a compressor for a small jet in the tail. It was a hybrid, a bridge between 2 technologies. They flew in 1945 but were experimental and never saw service. Italy had the remarkable Campini Caproni CC.2, which flew in 1940. This wasn't a true turbojet either. It used a conventional piston engine to drive a ducted fan, basically a more complex version of a motor jet. It was slow and inefficient, but technically, it was the second jet-powered aircraft to fly. Again, purely experimental, and in Japan, they were also working on jets. The Nakajima Kika, or Orange Blossom, was heavily inspired by the Me-262. It made one test flight in August 1945, just days before the war ended. Another interesting Japanese design was the Oka, or Cherry Blossom. This was a human-piloted, rocket-powered flying bomb, a kamikaze weapon. It was carried under a bomber, released near a target, and the pilot would guide it to its target. While rocket-powered, not jet-powered, it's often mentioned in these discussions due to its advanced propulsion. It was a terrifying and desperate weapon. So there you have it. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this deep dive into aviation history, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments which one of these early jets you find the most fascinating. See you next time.